a lot of you guys are probably aware of a character by the name of Drew Pavlou. Okay, he's running for Senate in Australia, I believe, and he's causing all sorts of ruckus over there.
His be all and end all is like Australia's beholden to the CCP. He wants to cut ties with that stuff and hold the governments accountable for being in bed with China.
Yeah, and he's the first person to really get up there and do it and speak up against it properly, like publicly, and he's kind of testing the waters there. And he got arrested for basically holding up a sign that said, F Xi Jinping. So we thought we'd get him on and have a little interview with him and find out exactly how that went, because it's incredibly important. So we're going to roll that now for you, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. So yeah, let's take a look at what good old Drew had to say. Everybody knows Drew by now, and Drew has a couple of very interesting things to tell you about. I personally think this is going to set a precedent when it comes to free speech in Australia. And whatever happens as a result of what happened to him, well, it's important. Let's pay attention. So Drew, please tell us what exactly went down.
Thank you so much, Winston. Thank you, Matt, for having me on. Basically, I'm a candidate in the elections in Australia. We've got a candidate in Bennelong, which is northwest Sydney. She's Tibetan, Kinzon Dongdu, the first Tibetan to ever run. So we've got a very diverse team, and we went with this diverse team in Kinzon Dongdu to an area in her electorate. We went to Eastwood Shopping Centre as it's a main thoroughfare in the electorate, and we were with Taiwanese pro-democracy supporters, Chinese pro-democracy supporters, Hong Konger pro-democracy supporters, Tibetans. And so my Taiwanese pro-democracy friend wrote on the sign the F Xi Jinping, the fuck Xi Jinping, in Chinese characters, because I don't speak Chinese. She wrote the sign out for us. I was standing next to, Tibetans, Chinese pro-democracy types. So within 2 minutes of me holding the sign, all these little pinks, these pro-China nationalists, ultra-nationalists basically, had begun surrounding us. It ended up being that we ended up being surrounded by about 50 to 60 people. And there were about 4 or 5 guys in there that were really, really aggressive. And so they started swearing at me. They started insulting me. They started hurling racial slurs at the pro-democracy Chinese and Taiwanese guys in our crowd. So, for example, the girl who wrote the sign, she's Taiwanese. They started hurling racial slurs at her, calling her rotten banana. Yellow on the outside, white on the inside was the slur. So they started using really brutal slurs. They were racist.
America has genocide. Fuck you.
Fucking shit, you motherfucker!
And I said, this isn't an anti-Chinese protest. This is an anti-CCP protest. We're just protesting against Xi Jinping. This is a guy with 1 million people in concentration camps. And then they would say stuff like, America's got concentration camps. China doesn't have concentration camps. Xi doesn't have concentration camps. So these people were explicitly pro-CCP. So one of the myths that popped up online, it turns out that there is no direct equivalent of fuck you in the Chinese language. So the sign basically was kanima, Xi Jinping fuck your mother. Tanima, sorry, yeah.
Cao. Cao. You gotta know how to swear properly, man.
Yeah, exactly. So the sign basically said Xi Jinping fuck Xi's mother. And it wasn't that I was deliberately setting out to insult his mother or whatever. I mean, this is just the standard equivalent of fuck you in the Chinese language.
Dude. I mean, like anyone who tries to twist it into anything else is being disingenuous, because that's what you hear. Someone cuts someone off in traffic, the taxi driver will shout that. When people are just having a friendly little argument, they use it. I've heard it a million times.
They were trying to twist it and say Drew's sign insulted all the Chinese people in the neighborhood. Drew's sign apparently was insulting the mothers of everyone in the neighborhood. That is a complete lie. The sign was just deliberate. The sign was only Xi Jinping, and the people who were attacking us were pro-CCP. They were saying stuff like, America has the genocide. America has the concentration camps, not China, not Xi Jinping. So they were directly saying stuff supportive of Xi Jinping, and so it escalated. not thanks to me, because I actually was completely peaceful the entire time. I didn't lay a finger on anyone. They were getting into my space. They were threatening to hit me, and I just said, you know, if you're gonna hit me. I'm peaceful. I had my hands behind my back. They came up behind Chris, the guy who was filming it. He's like an independent protest journalist. They came up behind Chris, put him in a bear hug, and then they came to me. And the guy who was holding a child in his arms actually like hit my sign, and then the two other really aggressive guys came up straight after they put Chris in a bear hug. Tried to smash his camera. They ripped the sign out of my hands, ripped it in pieces, stomped it on the ground. They were getting in my face. They were like, they were acting as though they were about to hit me. They were like sort of flinching in my direction like that. And so like the thing really escalated. And then suddenly police arrived like 2-3 minutes later. I had my hands behind my back the entire time because I didn't want anyone to be able to accuse me of being violent. I was peaceful the entire time. The police came, and for some reason the police were really aggressive towards us rather than the pro-China violent supporters. And so I pointed out the guy who actually assaulted Chris actually came up behind him, put him in a bear hug, tried to smash his camera. I said, that guy's assaulted people live as tens of people were filming right in front of 50-60 people in broad daylight in the middle of Sydney. He's assaulted people on camera. Are you going to go arrest him? And then they went up to talk to him, but they didn't arrest him. They came back to me and started being really, really aggressive, saying your sign's offensive, etc. I said, this is free speech. I peacefully protested. It's not insulting Chinese people. It's insulting Xi Jinping. It's protest against the CCP. My hands have been behind my back. I haven't touched anyone, but they were really, really aggressive towards me. They ultimately called it all off. And then I went to the police station to give a report about the assault. And at the time, the police seemed sympathetic to us because we were obviously the ones who were assaulted. We hadn't touched anyone. We weren't being aggressive. We were just holding a sign peacefully. At the time, they seemed sympathetic to us, but then it started really changing. And suddenly the pro-China supporters were really, really aggressive and were saying stuff like Drew was racially vilifying the Chinese community. The sign was racist against Chinese people, which is not true whatsoever. It was a direct insult against Xi Jinping, a brutal dictator, not the Chinese people. It's so disingenuous to claim that all Chinese people must support the CCP. So a criticism of the CCP in the middle of Australia must be racist towards Chinese people. That is such a racist and such a racist and disingenuous propaganda line that's propagated by the Chinese government. It's a complete lie. We were insulting the Chinese dictatorship, and there were many, many pro-democracy Chinese supporters who were there. They came up to us after the protests, thanked us for what we were doing. They said stuff like, I wish we could join the protest, but we're scared in Australia to join the protest. Multiple people said that to me. And the next day, I was going home to Brisbane, and the detective rang me up and he said, oh, Drew, can you come back into the station to discuss your statement? And I said, you know, I've already given my statement. I'm going to the airport to go home to my family. Like, why do you need me there? And I was like, is it because of the sign? Because I could, at that time, you know, it was going viral online, all these Chinese government supporters saying, Drew's sign was racist, etc. And he was like, yeah, well, we've been investigating your sign. You know, it didn't just say, fuck you, did it? It said, Xi Jinping, fuck your mother. And I said, well, that's a standard direct translation in Chinese. It wasn't, I mean, it's the equivalent of fuck you in Mandarin. Like, are you going to charge me with offensive language or something? I mean, I was peaceful the entire time. You've got my statement. And then he was like, oh, well, we can't do this over the phone. I'm going to have to talk to your lawyer. We'll communicate through your lawyer in future. And I went home to Brisbane and I told my lawyer about this, and he was like, this is like really, really dodgy what the police have done here, because they were trying to get you to come into the station to talk about your statement without a lawyer present. And what they really were doing, which is clear from the phone call, is they wanted you to come in so they could charge you with the sign. So the police were suddenly trying to go after me, even though I was the one attacked. And due to a lot of public pressure, they did end up charging the Chinese government supporter who assaulted Chris, had ripped up the sign, had threatened to attack me, assault me. But they charged him with assault. But as I said, they didn't arrest him on the day. They gave him a common assault charge. It's the lowest assault charge possible. And like, he wasn't arrested. He didn't spend any time in a prison cell, etc., etc. Not saying that he had to go to prison, not saying that he deserved to be in a cell necessarily, but like, I'm just trying to contrast his treatment to my treatment, because what happened was I went back the next week to the same place where we were attacked. And basically the goal was to just show defiance in the face of people who were, you know, violently trying to repress free speech in Australia. My whole point was, you know, in Australia, in the middle of Sydney. I should be able to insult Xi Jinping. We shouldn't be violently attacked. It should be, we were trying to make a stand for free speech by going back. And I went back with 30, 40, Hong Kong democracy supporters, Taiwanese democracy supporters, Chinese democracy supporters, a really diverse crowd. This time I didn't put any profanity on the signs because the police had threatened to arrest us on the spot if I put profanity on the signs.
Mm-hmm.
There were about 20, 30 police officers there to watch our demonstration. It was pretty intimidating. But everything was peaceful. Everything seemed to be going fine. They had not charged me with anything by that point. My lawyer had written to them and actually had expressed, he'd called out the fact that they had tried to deceive me into going into the station to charge me without a lawyer present. And so he said, if Drew's charged, we will take full legal action against the New South Wales police. And they said, well, Drew hasn't been charged. We're investigating. We'll inform you the second that Drew's charged. But there was no contact with the New South Wales police. I mean, I had told the Australian Federal Police, which is a level above the New South Wales Police, I told the detective who tried to charge me, I told them I'm going back to Eastwood to hold the protest. They'd seen my social media. They had 20 police officers there. So they later on, they would try and say that Drew didn't inform us that he was having a protest. Well, I told the AFP, I told New South Wales Police through the detective. The protest was peaceful. It was actually quite quiet for a while. It started off very peaceful. Everything was fine. There was no confrontation. There were a lot of police there. So no one was daring to attack us. I actually took a bit of a back foot. I took on a lesser role in the second protest. So I sort of let the Hong Konger, the Taiwanese and the Chinese pro-democracy groups sort of lead the protest in this one. They were chanting pro-democracy slogans in Mandarin and Cantonese as well. I don't speak these languages. I actually took a bit of a back foot in this second protest because I was I knew obviously the first rally I'd been attacked. It was very provocative. I knew New South Wales Police were looking for any reason to go after me. So I took on a much quieter role in the second protest. So that's why it became so bizarre that I ended up getting arrested. So what happened was the protest was peaceful. It was very quiet. The Chinese pro-democracy guys were chanting slogans in Mandarin. It was going towards the end of the protest. We did it for about 40, 50 minutes. It was going towards the end. We were about to pack it up, go home. And then these little pinks rocked up, these Chinese pro-CCP supporters, and they started yelling insults in Mandarin at the Chinese pro-democracy guys who were on our side. And then suddenly, the crowds pushed together. It became quite heated. I didn't do anything. I was holding a sign that said "Free Hong Kong, Free Tibet, Free the Uyghurs, Down with the CCP." No profanities. I didn't lay a finger on anyone. I wasn't even standing near the main confrontation. I was standing 3-4 meters off to the side. I was just yelling "Free Hong Kong." I was not even near, the main ruckus there. And then suddenly the New South Wales Police called me aside. They called me aside and tried to take me aside by myself so no one would be able to film, no one would be able to see what was happening. And I tried to get Kinsun to come over to film so that, because I just wanted evidence of whatever New South Wales Police were going to do to me. So calling Kinsun over, I tried to walk off to try to get Kinsun, and they actually stopped me. And I said, "Am I under arrest?" And they're like, "No, you're not under arrest," but they weren't letting me leave. And then they said, "We're giving you the charge for offensive language on your sign last week. You'll have a court date on such and such early June. Do you understand, etc." And I was like, "Okay, yep." And I had Kinsun filming, etc. So it was quite bizarre because clearly they had waited to the moment that any protest escalated to then charge me with the protest the week before, which is just really, really, bizarre. It doesn't sound like normal police tactics. It seems very much like an intimidation tactic. And it was also very, it was a very dodgy and dirty tactic as well, because the police detectives had told my lawyer, "We will directly inform you and Drew the second that if anything happens in the investigation." They didn't inform us of anything in the investigation. In fact, they waited until I was peacefully protesting again in Sydney to then charge me. So it was very much an intimidation tactic. Again, as I said, I tried to walk away before, and they were stopping me from walking away, but they said I wasn't under arrest. So it was this weird halfway arrest sort of thing where I couldn't leave, but they weren't arresting me formally. Eventually, they let me go, and I went off to join the crowd again, and I just was I still was, again, like 5 meters from the main confrontation. I just was chanting Free Hong Kong. I wasn't even doing anything. I was peaceful. I literally was just holding a sign 5 meters away, chanting Free Hong Kong. And then the police sergeant in charge came over again and said, Drew, I'm giving you a formal move on order. The protest is escalating and it's now causing fear and alarm to the public. There's now a violent threat. And so I'm directing you to move on. Otherwise you'll be arrested. And it was this is the terrible thing about it, right? So based on the precedent they were setting here, we can be peaceful. And if pro-China, if pro-CCP supporters come along, ultra-nationalist little pinks, and then they get violent and they attack people and they insult people, people have to automatically shut down protests, and you will be blamed for it because you're the one sparking fear and alarm among the public by holding a protest in the first place. So basically what they're giving is a free license to CCP supporters to shut down any protest in Sydney or Australia, anywhere in Australia. If they come along to a peaceful protest and get violent and attack people, then the police will say, oh, well, the CCP, well, then the pro-democracy supporters are the ones causing fear and alarm among the public. They're the ones starting a violent escalation. We will shut down their protests. So it's a terrible thing for free speech in this country. And
I have a quick
question.
Do you think it would be that case in the opposite? Like, for example, if there were pro-CCP protesters and there were anti-CCP people that came to confront those protesters, do you think it would go that way too?
No, I don't think so, because just in my own experience, like going back to the first protest that started everything for me back at UQ in July 2019, that was the first protest where I got punched and stuff like that because I was saying down with Xi Jinping at UQ. On that day, the police directly told me and the pro-democracy crowd to move on multiple times. Never a threat of arrest though, which really shows how the New South Wales police were really like just completely out of control. They never tried to threaten to arrest me at UQ, but the police out that day, they did try and move on the pro-democracy supporters, but never once did they ever try and move on the anti-CCP. Never once did they ever try and move on the pro-CCP supporters, not once. So it's a double standard. It's almost like they're scared of the CCP supporters, and the CCP supporters are almost, above the law. And that's why the police were so aggressive. So they told me to move on, and I said, with respect, officer, I'm not moving on because this is about conscience for me. This is a matter of free speech. And he said, well, you will be arrested. And I said, I will accept arrest. And so I didn't make any attempt to resist whatsoever. They didn't even put handcuffs on me because I literally just I wasn't doing anything to resist arrest. He just said, come with me. And I said, okay. And I just walked along with him. And, I had to wait for the paddy wagon or whatever. The police vans would show up. They came up, they patted me down in front of everyone. There were all these people watching me in public. And then they put me they made me take off my belt because apparently just in case I was a suicide threat or whatever, they put me in the back of the police van. And then they took me to the police station, fingerprints, mugshot. They wanted to do an interview with my lawyer not present, which I refused. I just had to sit there for 5 hours, no contact with the outside world. I wasn't allowed to use my phone. I was only allowed 1 or 2 phone calls. And then that's when I called my dad. And he was like, oh, Drew, what are you doing? He was really upset with me because my dad's old Greek conservative bloke. He doesn't like me getting in trouble, which is fair enough.
I'm sure you realize just how important this whole scenario is when it comes to setting a precedent in Australia for free speech, because to dumb it down for everyone who maybe just doesn't understand the situation, you in your own country went to go stand in public and hold up a sign that said, Xi Jinping, F you, or F your mother, which is the same thing in Chinese. And you're the one who got attacked and then arrested, warned off, and got into trouble. This is the most ridiculous thing. It shows you just how afraid Australia is of China and how much China has a grasp and a control over Australia. Because if you went up there and you put up a sign saying, I don't know, fuck Mandela, or, fuck the Dalai Lama, or, you could choose anyone, even your own
Prime Minister.
Yeah, exactly. You could say, fuck Scott Morrison, you would have been fine. No, you would be absolutely fine. Yeah. No, we know that's the case. And it's just like anywhere else in the world where you could go hold up a sign saying F whatever, but you hold up a fuck Xi Jinping. And if there's a considerable amount of influence over the country, Chinese influence, you will suddenly get a lot of trouble, just like you have. So you have to make sure that this is fought tooth and nail. You have to set a precedent so that the people of Australia can stop being afraid of speaking out against the Chinese government. And it's disgusting that they jumped directly on the whole racism thing, which is something that the Chinese government has been very successful in using to silence opponents abroad. They jump on racism, especially since you were there with your Asian candidates. All right. Yeah. And Taiwanese and Hong Kongese, are they not Chinese? Why? I mean, you had a Chinese person write the sign for you. Is that not a Chinese woman? Does she not have a say in this? Why do they have to suddenly demonize what you guys did as a group?
And they called her a race traitor for doing that.
I mean, that's the thing. They're terribly racist.
Yeah, that's the thing that worried me the most. This takeaway was that you and an entourage of other Asian people of all different, countries or territories cannot feel safe to stand up against the dictatorship that is oppressing them in their own territories in a sovereign country like Australia.
Yeah, and now they're coming there and they're oppressing the people and they're controlling and scaring the people in Australia. It's disgusting.
Yeah, so as I said as well, directly after I got attacked, just before I went to the police station on that first day to give the statement, there were a number of Taiwanese and Chinese pro-democracy supporters who had just been watching on, they were watching on in the background. They didn't want to get directly involved because they were scared. They basically directly said that to me. They came up and they said, "Thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm really scared for your safety. I really wish I could do what you're doing, but I'm scared for my safety." And so I'm obviously lucky because I don't have family members in China that the Chinese government can go after. I have that, level of privilege. I'm protected by my Australian citizenship. And even they're going after even me. So obviously it sends a signal. It creates a chilling effect where a lot of people become scared to speak out. And exactly as you said, you go to any climate rally in Australia, you go to any protest, you can see dozens and dozens of signs that say "fuck Scott Morrison," "fuck Peter Dutton," "fuck," multiple members of the government. No one will ever get arrested. No one will ever get charged. No one gets bashed. No one would ever, cause a problem. I mean, this is just normal political speech in Australia. But suddenly, when you say "fuck Xi Jinping," for some reason that's not protected free speech in Australia. For some reason, that becomes something that's across the line. And so, and we know why that is. It's because supporters of the Chinese government will use racists, will try and smear you as a racist. They would actually use violence to try and shut down your rally, etc. And the police don't know how to deal with it. And when the CCP supporters get violent, they actually crack down on the pro-democracy peaceful side because they just want the whole they just want the tension to end. So
they don't want to be called racist themselves.
Well, that's the issue that I have with it is that what you're to the leadership in New South Wales or whatever in Australia in general, you have to understand, and if I'm talking to them right now, you have to understand that you've created a situation where Asian people themselves don't have a safe place to be. So you've created tyranny and race-based tyranny for other Asian people.
Yeah, it's freaking ridiculous.
That's very, very good. Well said.
Well, at least you're getting people talking. The eyes of the world are looking at this right now, hopefully more and more. And we wish you the best of luck, mate. Just keep fighting and keep us up to date as to how it goes. And especially this ridiculous charge against you by the New South Wales police. We've got to see what happens with that. So keep us up to date.
To our audience, all of Drew's links are down below.
Yeah, go follow him on Twitter.
He's obviously posting all the stuff he's talking about. So go check that out. Yeah. And we appreciate you, Drew.
I basically have the same posting schedule as Trump. I mean, there's 50, 60 tweets a day. I'm tweeting there on the toilet. Gotcha. So people follow along. And thank you so much, Winston and Matt. I always appreciate your support. And you guys have given me, honestly, a lot of guidance because you have had those run-ins with the really vile propagandists before. They've tried to smear you. They've tried to they've tried to destroy your names just like they've tried to destroy mine. And so your guidance, dealing with that has been a big help. So I really appreciate your help, guys. And
our pleasure.
And I'll definitely
absolute pleasure.
And I'll definitely update you as the case progresses because we'll try to go to the High Court. And thank you so much because we're in this movement together.
Yep.
We're trying to wake the world almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you,
stuff,
Kings,
man.
legends.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyway, mate, thanks. Seriously,
Awesome.
that was good. It was good to have Drew on the show to explain what happened to him. And I would just need to reiterate again just how damning that whole situation is. That as an Australian citizen in his own country, to go in the middle of an Australian city, to go and hold up a sign and say, fuck Xi Jinping, and he gets arrested, basically. And he gets harassed and he gets attacked.
Not correct.
No, it's not correct.
No.
And, you know,
Makes no sense.
Something else that actually really pisses me off about this entire situation is the fact that he's there with his Asian counterparts, okay, his peers, the people that are running with him, but he's the only one that's getting the shit.
Taiwanese, Tibetans, Uyghurs.
It's as if everybody ignores his Asian counterparts as if they don't matter.
Yeah, that actually bothers me. When media tries to go after him and stuff, they are ignoring all of the Asian human rights activists that are there.
Yeah, look at the second protest when he was actually arrested. He was there with Tibetans and Hong Kongers and Taiwanese and Uyghurs.
But the news doesn't pay attention to them.
He was standing there. Yeah. Everybody else was shouting and doing worse than him. Like you said, he took a back foot and he just kind of stood there with a sign. But the people that were shouting and waving flags and everything, none of them were arrested. Do they not matter? Do their opinions not matter? It's only Drew.
Right.
It shows you just how racist the whole situation actually is, that they just go after him and ignore the Asian people that are involved in this, as if they don't matter.
Yeah, and the Asian people that were affected in China
Yeah.
about this,
Yeah.
right? It's insane. Anyway.